Hi, I'm Melissa from the Yarn Barn, and I'm going to introduce you to a variety of different tools that are used to measure a warp. This is the Schacht 14-yard warping board. It's typical of warping boards in that it has 4 separate pieces that come to you. The pegs are already installed, but 4 separate pieces that are then bolted together with just a bolt and a butterfly knot. So it's easy to put together, easy to take apart if you need to. This 14-yard warping board has the greatest capacity of any of the warping boards that we carry. And it has some nice advantages. There are multiple pegs at the top and the bottom for placing your pori cross. So if you like short tails, you can put it here. If you want longer ones, you can put it here. So it's pretty versatile. And then you can also measure the pori cross down here. And the pegs make it possible to do a pori cross at the beginning and the end of your warp, or just gives you the opportunity to do fractions of a warp. Now this is about a yard wide, so you can measure 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, for example, and then go down here for a fraction of a yard. If you need to measure a lot of yardage, this is probably your best bet among the warping boards. The Schacht warping board can be leaned against a surface. At home, I lean my warping board against the upper cabinets in my kitchen and the weight rests on the counter. But you can also clamp it with just a C-clamp from the hardware store. Now, because Schacht's board has these little wooden ends to the uprights, that would get in the way if you were wanting to put it against a long countertop, for example. But on the end of a table, it works great that you just use the clamp and clamp it to the surface of a counter or a smaller table. That works great. It can be pretty versatile. To clamp it to a wall would be challenging because of the butterfly nuts at the back, but you could mount it onto, for example, a piece of wood that would bring the warping board out away from the wall surface. This is the Schacht 4.5-yard warping board. So unlike the typical warping board that's a yard from one peg to the other, this is half a yard. So it's the smallest capacity of any of the warping boards that we carry. So it's very compact, which is great. The pegs are fairly close together, about 2.5 inches, a little bit more of clearance here. So you want to keep that in mind as you're moving your hand in between the pegs. It can be a little tight if you have larger hands, but it is very compact. 4.5 yards isn't a very long warp, so if you are thinking that a smaller warping board might be the right one for you, think about what you would be weaving, because with 4.5 yards, if 1 yard is loom waste, that only leaves you 3.5 yards to weave. But that might be what you're looking for. In that case then, this is the one. It comes to you as 4 separate pieces. You bolt them together with a bolt and a butterfly nut, so it's very easy. And then you can lean it against a surface. You could even lay this one down to measure your warp. Or you can clamp it on a surface, but it's a little bit challenging because of the way the wood sticks out at the bottom. But with maybe a little bit of support in the middle, you can do it. This is the Beka 9-yard warping board. So typical of most warping boards, it comes to you as 4 pieces. This one, that one, and the bottom one. The pegs are already installed. So all you have to do is put the 4 pieces together. It's different from most warping boards in the way that they go together. So most warping boards, the side piece and the top piece bolt together with a bolt that goes from the front to the back, and then you get a big old butterfly nut on the back. But with Beka, the bolt comes in from the side and goes into a barrel nut. So there's nothing on the back that would prevent you from either mounting it on the wall or just leaning it up against the wall, and you don't have to worry about anything scratching the wall. This also has maybe a little bit more room than most warping boards. Here it's actually a little bit more than 4 inches. So there's plenty of room for your hand to go between the pegs as you're measuring. And the position of the pegs for the pori cross can either be here, or when you assemble it, you can flip this top piece and put the pegs here, whichever is your preference for where you like the pori cross to be in relation to the end of the warp. And this is the Beka 9-yard. If you're on a budget, Schacht's warping pegs might be what you need to measure your warp. There's not much to them, but they actually do the job. So you have 2 pieces of wood with pegs. This piece creates your pori cross. This represents the end of your warp. So what you do is, you take the clamps that are provided and you clamp this piece at some point, table, countertop, something like that, with the clamp. Then you take the other one and you move it to a distance that represents the length of the warp you want. So if you want, let's say, a 6-foot warp, you take this, so it's 6 feet away from this. Use the clamp and clamp it down. And then you measure and walk back and forth between the clamps. So it's the most budget-friendly version, and it's a bit of a workout. And that's the Schacht warping pegs.